Hi, this is Ashok Sinha. I'm the author of Gas and Glamour, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Joining us today are John O'Neill and D.C. Hillier, host of the new mid-century modern podcast, The Perspecta. Later, stick around for musical guest Eden Atwood, who will leave you breathless. And now, out of breath, here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. That's what happens when you spend time listening to Eden Atwood singing. Either that, or I need to spend more time on the treadmill. But in my continuing quest for exercise avoidance, I just bought a 9-bot. That is an e-scooter made by Segway, along the lines of Lime or Birds units you see on city sidewalks strewn about in the U.S. and Canada. Scooters, like poker, take 15 minutes to learn and a lifetime to master. You have to be vigilant, because one slight movement will put your butt right on the asphalt. I wouldn't say these are dangerous, but thanks to the encouragement, nagging of friends and family, I did get a helmet. And thanks to another friend, I took my first rides in a huge cemetery in Raleigh, one with no people, cars, and lots of small paved roadways. If you think that's weird, no worries. The cemetery approves of these quiet practice runs. In fact, it was a major stop for years on the Raleigh Segway Tour.
I've been there, and I've fallen there.
U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In a timeless adventure that we are completely making up, realtor Angela Roll grew up in Estonia, the daughter of a former ambassador wrongly accused of spying on next-door Lithuania. He was cleared, it turns out, because Estonia only has 6 spies, and everybody pretty much knows who they are. After a night of partying with Le Corbusier's cousin, Boozy Corbusier, Angela took the ferry across the Gulf to Finland, causing an international incident involving a little red dress, a wood-turning lathe, the Finnish Coast Guard, and a $2,400 bar tab she accidentally signed over to Bjork. Angela escaped the resulting media frenzy on a train to Denmark in the company of international man of mystery Eric of Aarhus, whom she later married. Angela then moved to North Carolina to become a real estate agent, specializing in modernist houses. Angela advises buyers and sellers on everything, from appropriate renovation to shipping a wood-turning lathe from Helsinki. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or call 919-995-0550. Our guest John O'Neill lives in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, the nation's largest concentration of gas streetlights. You know, the kind they had like 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It's also the home of astronaut Buzz Aldrin, photographer Cindy Sherman, and Tom Cruise. He is a proud graduate of Glen Ridge High School. By day, John is Senior Vice President of Client Development at Publicis Media, and by night, he is a mid-century modern collector and fan. He's co-host of the Perspecta podcast, launched in April 2021. And he is also cat dad to Frankie and Charlie, who have their own Instagram account. Welcome, John.
Thanks so much for having us. Great info on Glen Ridge there. I didn't know that much.
Oh yeah. Tom Cruise all the way.
Yep. And the gas streetlights.
Yep. Yeah, I knew the gas street lamps because it is very dark and makes it difficult to see the Frank Lloyd Wright house that is on my street.
Darn. Meanwhile, D.C. Hillier is based in Montreal, Canada, home of Just for Laughs, the largest comedy festival in the world, and epicenter of 85% of the world's supply of maple syrup. Montreal has also hosted more large international events than anywhere else in the world, including the famous Expo 67, which we'll be covering in a future show. D.C. is a designer and author of Mid-Century Modern at Home, a room-by-room guide. He has a degree in film from the Ontario College of Art and Design, and he's on committees with Canada's Design Museum. D.C. has a huge following on Instagram, Facebook, his online magazine MCM Daily, and now co-hosting Perspecta with John. Welcome, D.C.
Well, thank you for having us. We do have the world's largest supply of maple syrup, but because of the recent supply chain issues, they've had to open the Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve. And I'm not joking. That is what it's called.
Really?
Quebec controls 75% of the world's maple syrup supply, and there's been shortages throughout the world. And you can't make trees make more syrup, so you have to open the reserve. And I'm not a fan of maple syrup. Matter of fact, I actually don't like maple syrup at all. And
really?
You can get syrup on anything. And I'm going to probably be kicked out of the city by saying this. I prefer the fake maple syrup.
Oh, my God.
Such heresy.
Your citizenship has been revoked. I have been to one of those. I've been to one of those maple syrup houses or cabins or shacks, whatever they are, north of Montreal.
Cabine à sucre. Yeah. Sugar shack.
Yeah, a sugar shack. You're right. And it is amazing. You really can get maple syrup on anything. And they'll serve.
You go to those events, though, and about 3 hours in, every child is wired to within an inch of its life. It's literally, it's like a new level.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Now, DC, before we get started, I have to ask, what's the DC stand for?
It's just two initials that I have my father's name and his father's name, and I'm a third.
Okay.
And at the beginning of my life, everyone was calling me Junior. And it was my mother who decided to call me by my initials because she did not like Junior at all. And so it just got stuck. But whether or not she was dyslexic, I've never, ever had the opportunity to ask. She got my first two initials mixed up. It's actually CD. Because the real name is Cyrus Dale Hillier III. And while it does sound a little to the manner born, nothing could be further from the truth. Family tradition. Second sons get named after their fathers. That's all it is.
And I think no one really likes Junior.
DC, that's it. Yeah. And also, she ensured that I would have a lifetime if people asked me what it stood for.
Well, it's like...
It's a good conversation starter, at least, if nothing else. Though when I was rude in my teens, I would say things like, dumb, see you next Tuesday, Diet Coke, Desperado.
I guess you couldn't work up the line that you were the heir to the DC Comics fortune.
Not quite. No, not quite.
Not quite.
Okay. You
DC, is that your historic woodworking side of the family?
Both sides are woodworkers in my family. My maternal lineage, centuries of boat builders, and on my that's on my father's side. And on my mother's side, cabinet makers and framers, house framers and cabinet makers. And quite often they would work together because boats needed storage and stuff like that. So both my grandfathers would work together building he would take care of the inside. My grandfather would build the outside. And these were sailboats. I mean, these were wooden sailboats way back then. And where I grew up in Newfoundland, they used wooden sailboats well into the 60s for commercial reasons. The industry was there, it was established, and they saw no need to get away from it. It was only into the 70s, really, that you get diesel-powered ships. And, there goes the boat-building side of the family, but, the cabinet-making people are still there. Yeah.
Well, then you switched to furniture and architecture, right?
Exactly. And I learned from my grandfathers whenever I restore a stereo. I've talked to John about this. I always feel their presence whenever I'm sanding a piece of wood or staining something or cutting something or just rebuilding something. I don't believe in necessarily it's in your blood, but it is somewhat innate. You grow up around it. It becomes a part of you.
It seeps in. It does. Whether you want it to or not sometimes.
And my incredible desire to swear at everything, I guess.
Well, we're a PG show, so Tom will bleep the worst of your offenses.
Haven't heard any yet.
Yeah.
I will keep it.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
I can't be sure of John, though.
John, a kickoff question for you. Are you jealous that your cats have a larger social media following than you do?
That was an experimentation, right? You learn a little bit about Instagram, through managing that account. And, they're cute. I can't deny. And little did I know as I got deeper and deeper into this niche here in mid-century modern design that cats are pretty prevalent.
They're everywhere.
There's a mid-century modern cats account,
No.
I think, based in Brooklyn that I've seen.
Yeah.
People posting with their Eames chairs and everything. So I think it worked out. But we're growing the perspective. We're having fun with it.
And I believe there's also a Brutalism and Cats account.
Yes.
Where they
only recently I saw that. Yes.
Where they superimpose pictures of cats against brutalist concrete buildings.
Okay.
And people go wild over this.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got a significant following. And they're funny. They're really good.
DC, as part of your superhero origin story, you were entranced by a James Bond movie. Which one?
You Only Live Twice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the one where he goes to Japan, right?
Yeah.
I get my James Bond titles mixed up, so yeah. And what was there when he does go to Japan? Two things got sparked. He's driving a Toyota 2000, which was Toyota's first attempt at a real proper sports car. Now it was a hardtop, and he couldn't fit in it. He's 6'3", so they made it like overnight. They literally cut the top off, and when you go to watch the movie, you can see that they actually put what looks like black electrical tape around the windshield to cover up the cuts.
Oops.
So he could fit in it. But that's such a great car, and if you want one now, you're going to have to, part with $1.5 million to get one. But when he goes inside, and I'm like, what? I'm seeing this on TV, whatever, and I'm like 9 or 10, and I'm absolutely enthralled by the furniture. I've never seen furniture like it. I've never opened an architect or design magazine, a modern design magazine, but in this movie, I didn't know furniture could look like that. It could look so modern and so futuristic as my yet undeveloped design mind was taking this in. But it stuck with me. And ever since then, whenever I see a magazine or show about design, before I actually ended up working in design, that was it for me. I never bought comic books. I bought design magazines. There's a Canadian magazine called Azure, for instance, that I was used to buy because it had both design and furniture. And yeah, that's it. That movie, I mean, that's the thing about James Bond. It always has the villain's lair in it. And in 3 of those movies, it's a John Lautner design.
Right, sure.
And to me, it's like, okay, I don't know if you know the story of Goldfinger, the architect in Britain.
Yes.
Now, when Ian Fleming was writing the very first James Bond book, prior to that, he'd written Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. So he wanted to write the spy book. And he was living in a 200-year-old house. At the bottom of his property, and it wasn't his property, but near his property, there were these series of cottages. And he was hoping to preserve them. But the architect, Goldfinger...
Erno Goldfinger, yeah.
Yeah, Erno Goldfinger bought the land, tore down the cottages, and he decided then that every villain in his book... Well, the first villain was Goldfinger, but every villain in his book would live in a modern house. And that's why all the villains in James Bond live in modern homes, because he hated them so much.
Oh, I did not know that.
Look at that.
So
Wow.
Goldfinger was a real villain in his eyes. But I will say the house he built is astonishing. It's one of the most beautiful houses I've ever seen, frankly. Goldfinger is better known for building the brutalist towers of London, Trellick Tower, for instance, stuff like that. But, yeah, that's it for me. James Bond sparked that interest that never left.
So how did you turn this into a profession, DC?
Oh, okay. Weirdly, I didn't have any desire to be a designer necessarily. So I got jumped 2 grades in high school, ended up at university at the age of 16 with no clue with what I wanted to do. And like every student that doesn't know what they want to do, they go into the social sciences. So I went into clinical psychology. And at first it was fine. It was fun to learn stuff. But then after my bachelor's degree, I had to decide what I wanted to do. I think in retrospect, foolishly decided I'm going to pursue the master's in what I've already studied. And I got my master's in clinical psych. But I wasn't happy. Halfway through that, I moved from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Toronto, Ontario. And when I was there, I decided, okay, I could go into the workforce or do what I do, be a student. So I went to the University of Toronto, looked into their doctorate program, and there are worse things you can do being a doctor of psychology. On the way home, there was this old building, this sort of Italianate building, but on the steps were these rather glum-looking people, and they're all smoking, because this is where they went on their smoke breaks. And I was curious about this building. So I walked up the steps, talked to a woman there, a young woman there, and she said, oh, this is the foundation building for the Ontario College of Art. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And as I talked to her, I asked her what she was planning on studying, and she was going to study industrial design. And I thought about furniture and architecture and all that stuff. And I thought, oh, I'll just go inside and get some information. Took it home, read it. Next day, I applied, and I had 2 weeks to put together a portfolio, a design portfolio, as I thought, that I'd never done before. So I spent 10, 12 hours every day, put together my portfolio, got into the school, which is crazy because only 1 in 400 applicants gets in.
And do you have to smoke in order to get into the school?
Well, I did smoke at the time, but you're art school. You got to smoke.
Yeah, okay.
You got to wear black clothing.
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
it. So after that, I got into the industrial design program. I didn't like industrial design, so I moved to film. And as a poor working student, it was not handed to me. I had to work all the way through school. Fortunately for me, I was working in the school, so that made it easier. I needed to furnish an apartment. I got my first place as a student proper. And I went to the junk stores, found modern furniture, some of it kind of kitschy and junky, and took courses in reupholstering and a few extra courses in refinishing, stripping and refinishing, and just went out and bought cheap furniture, reupholstered it, redid it, and that's the place I have. I have a photo of myself in that place on a 1960s Polish throne, and it looks like it's from the 1960s, the haircut, what I'm wearing, everything. But yeah, that's how I got into design. While I was at school, somebody wisely said, you're studying film. There's not like you can go to the film place and get a job as a director or a writer. You may need a backup. So I decided to study graphic design. I moved to Montreal. Then I became a packaging designer, then an interior designer. And then I was tired of it and decided to write a blog about it. I was on a break. I broke my foot or toe, 2 toes, on my last job. So I was on an extended break, and that's when I started the MCM Daily.
And that has been really wildly successful, DC.
You know what? This is the weird thing about being internet famous. It's like a lot of people know you, but you don't have any money. But I tell you one thing, those who fail at it are those who don't care about their subject. They care about the fame. And I've seen that. I mean, I'm not on Instagram or whatever. Can you imagine me posing shirtless on Instagram with a design chair in the background, putting up a peace sign? And that's good for them because they are their own brand. But for me, because I'm an ag ed, I spent 11 years in post-secondary school because I had nothing else to do. I was all about education, teaching people all these things. And you'd hear these comments like, well, you're posting a lamp that's $20,000. We can't go out and buy a $20,000 lamp. And I used to tell people, wow, but imagine if you could identify that lamp in a thrift shop. And people have.
Yeah.
And that's what
$20.
was sterling for me. I don't care about the price of stuff. I care about the design. I was looking at my insights on Instagram just yesterday. And sometimes, it hovers around 100 followers a day mark. In the last 7 days, I added 2,500 followers. And I can't figure out, which is quite a lot within that period. It's fun for me. There are some days the comments are a little stupid, but that's the nature of online
That's
comments.
the nature of everything these days.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, I'm always thrilled that people say, I lived in that house. That is the nugget for me. Like when I meet, or meet in quotes, people who lived in these houses that I think are worth showcasing. People who grew up in these wonderful homes that they grew up in, architectural treasures. It's incredible. But so often don't anymore. These people grow up. And because that's the sad thing for me. And again, I don't want to take time from John here.
Okay, well, let me ask John a question, and then we'll come back to you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. John, in the podcast, The Perspecta, you made the choice to present it both in audio and video formats on YouTube. What went into that decision? And will you be featuring DC shirtless soon?
Well, he put that one out there. So I don't know. We shall see. Maybe a bad Photoshop job, Easter egg somewhere. But look, I think DC and I connected. And I sort of did the opposite. I went into business. I went into marketing and advertising. And, during this last couple of years at home, I think I was seeking to, number one, do more research and learn more about this design style that I love in mid-century modern, and really create. I was seeking a podcast. I wanted to create something ultimately where I was the audience and I wanted to listen to that, right? So I think it is such a visual medium that video is critical. Before DC and I connected, one of my first phone calls was Greg Gibaldi, who does all of our technical work and joins us in the podcast with his quips. And he consumes more on YouTube, and I consume a bit more on the podcast. And he has a bit of a, let's say, a 101 level, but quickly growing knowledge. And I'd say I'm at 201, and DC is at, 5601. I don't know how big those courses go up. But we thought it was really important to showcase and start to form those connections between the items or buildings, homes, pieces of furniture, so that somebody can start to learn. And the videos we're putting up are pretty long. and we've stuck to that, and we're gonna keep optimizing here and there and cutting them up and seeing what sticks. But people watch them, and that really has been the most fulfilling part of this. I mean, the fact that we're delayed a couple days on putting a video up, and somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, I didn't see that go up. I usually watch it twice before I listen to the audio." And I said, "Wow, I guess we're doing something pretty cool here."
You really are. I mean, you've only got, 7 shows so far, but you've had some great guests. Yicky Torres of Atomic Ranch, Matt Bliss, who's been on our show, Tim Ross, who's been on our show from Australia.
Yeah.
Who have you got coming up?
Honestly, right now, I think we're open for business. We have a few folks that I keep pretty close to the chest that we've been coordinating with. I think we're sort of getting to the point, which is sort of interesting, that we're being considered press. So I don't know if you fall into that.
Oh, yeah, that happens.
Yeah, but, the people we reach out to, form a connection with, say, hey, I got to get my PR team involved.
Yeah. And
I need to get approval to discuss some of this stuff because we have some big things coming up. So from that perspective, it's getting Perspecta. It's getting more and more interesting. And I think 2022 is going to be interesting. We're hitting a little slowdown right now. I'm actually getting married on New Year's Eve to my fiance Kelly, and we're getting married at the TWA Hotel.
Oh,
so
wow.
Talk about historic architecture there. As long as everything goes to plan.
John, weren't your cats involved in the proposal?
They were. They were. Good research.
Tell us that story.
It was a surprise on Easter after we had been dating for many years, and it was not easy to wrangle them, but I was able to sneak the ring on a collar, bow tie collar that I added to our cat Frankie, and kind of push him over.
Was Frankie not on board at first?
Frankie didn't approve of his choice.
We had some trying moments. There was a lot of treats involved. Let's put it that way. But he executed well, and we're excited for our New Year's Modernist wedding coming up.
Well, that's great. The TW Hotel is one of our favorite places. I've stayed there quite a few times. Are you going to get married in the airplane or where on site?
So there is a reception hall under one of the larger buildings that was built in more contemporary times where all the rooms are. So that's down there. And then the goal is to celebrate potentially in sort of the main lobby area, depending on if they have a bigger party. But we'll see the ball drop, and it should be a good time. I got to say, every time I walk in there now, it's been a few times for me as well, coordinating, it is just breathtaking. It really is. It makes you stop, and I'm hoping to share that with all my guests. Really in the same way that, we're ultimately trying to share education on the Perspecta, surprise people, delight them, start to make it clear that this is a distinct style, and it's something with a great deal of history. There's a lot to sink your teeth into.
That's why we're all here, man.
Yeah.
DC, you're quite a collector. I'm wondering, have you exceeded your house and started storage units yet?
Oh, you know what? One of the pieces of advice I got from a collector years ago was, do not pay rent for your things. Basically, pay rent for yourself and fill your place that you pay rent for yourself with things. And once you've met your limit, stop. I regret to say that's not the case. So I'm not paying rent. My partner, his parents have a house in the country on the Ontario side of the border, and their basement right now, it's like a museum's decorative arts collection down there. There are a number of Clairtones yet to be restored down there. There is a chair, a Bellini chair, which is quite rare. There's a Moby chair, but the house is filled. It's overfilled, really. And at first it was very elegant, and now it's a little more eccentric.
So DC, Clairtone, I understand, is an audio company. Was it related at all to Newtone, the intercom company?
No. Clairtone was started by a World War II Jewish refugee coming from Switzerland in 1958 with a furniture importer, mostly Danish furniture importer of a fairly wealthy family. Well, they were both from wealthy families. In 1958, they started Clairtone, which was a custom stereo. So basically, they went and bought various components. They had a cabinet maker, George Wheel, And they would do custom stereos. And some of those, I've seen photos of them, were very ornate or incredibly modern, very almost Herman Miller-esque, George Nelson modern. And then they decided they would just make their own stuff. And they opened up a proper factory in Rexdale, Ontario, and made stereos. Regular, ordinary, everyday, modern, a little more Spanish colonial, stuff like that. Floor model stereos, as you probably remember growing up. You know, they sat big cabinets, lift lids, all that stuff.
Right.
And they were doing fine, but they thought they could do better. So they hired British designer Hugh Spencer to come up with something for the 64 Merchandise Mart building, our furniture fair in Chicago. And he, no idea what to do. He was playing around with sketches. I've actually seen the sketches he was doing. He had some very outrageous, cool ideas. But what he presented to the co-founders of the company, Peter Monk and David Gilmore, was a piece of 2x4 with a tennis ball glued at either end. 2 tennis balls. He said, something like this. And within 6 months, they had a working prototype made. And that's the thing they took to the show. And they were simply besieged with orders for this thing. However, that didn't pan out. Because when they finally got to manufacturing it in early 64, I spoke with the production manager who was responsible for that, and making those stereos. And he said it was a nightmare to make those things. They were so labor-intensive. The aluminum, all the cast polished aluminum was made by a cookware company, and they nearly actually went bankrupt because their own production got delayed so long trying to fulfill the orders for Clairtone.
Now, I'm looking at a picture. Were the balls meant to be speakers? They were speakers?
They are speakers.
Ah.
Yeah. So when it finally went to market, the cheapest they could make it, and it was razor-thin profit at this price, was $2,000 for a Project G in 1964. So roughly the same as a modest car today or an average car.
Right.
And they made 390 of them, of which they sold less than 200. The rest went back to the factory where they simply got dismantled. The aluminum got melted down again to reuse back in the cookware company. And so far we have accounted for about 54, I think exact number, still around today. And they're quite collectible, and people, when we restore them, we update them as well. We put modern, better preamps. We redo all the wiring. We recap the amps to make sure they sound as good as possible. But also, Clairtone decided in 66 to put out the G2, which was half the price. And it sold marginally better, but not a runaway success. And they nearly disappeared from the Canadian design landscape, right up until the Design Museum, the DX, was founded. And one of their first acquisitions was a G2, shortly afterwards a Project G. And people suddenly got interested in them. And we bought a Project G, because I got a G2, I forgot to mention, when I was at art school. I found one in a junk shop. And it was $600, and $600 I could not afford as a student. And that was a lean month food-wise for me that year. But, and then we start back about 15 years ago. You could find them fairly regularly, Gs and G2s. And at one point, we'd find them, clean them up. We weren't actually doing the restorations at that point, but we found one that had been gutted. So I rebuilt the interior and all that. We had 22 of them, Project Gs and G2s. And we can't keep putting these down here. Obviously, I know your parents say they never use their basement, whatever. So somebody contacted us. It never occurred to us to sell one. So he bought a G and a G2. So he got one for his office in New York and one for his condo in Vancouver. And ever since then, we've acquired more. And sometimes people will send us theirs for a restoration. We update them to wireless, too. So when you select tape on the amp, it receives wireless signal.
How do they sound?
Okay, there's 2 levels of sound for them. The first generation Project G will literally knock your socks off. It's amazing how great that stereo sounds. Now, they put out a second generation, which sounds very, very good. But they didn't do a very good job matching the amp to the speakers, because the speakers are British Wharfdale. So anyway, we actually fixed that problem with the T10s when we get them. We take them to a guy who knows how to make them better matched to the speakers. The G2 sounds fun. Like, it's a fun-sounding stereo. It's really kicky sound. It's like, I can see why this was used for dance music, because it's got a heavy bass to it. But, I mean, as far as the prices go, if you go on first dibs, you get a good idea, for instance, what people are willing to pay for these.
So, DC, I'm thinking just, based on what you've said so far, this sounds like a wonderful way for you to use your film skills in making a documentary on Clairtone.
See, now you're talking, that's a secret no one's supposed to know about. I'm not going to mention the show, but a producer of a fairly popular Netflix show who lives in Toronto, who actually, we restored his Clairtone for him.
Yeah.
And it appears in one of the episodes of the show he produces, again, in a villain set in the background. Because only villains look modern design. Yeah, so he's working out some ideas right now with Science and Technology Museum there, because they've got some great footage that we want to use. But there's something in the pipe, coming down the pipe, I should say.
Excellent.
The only thing I dislike about this, and John probably will know this, I hate being on camera. I literally was nervous. The first podcast, I was literally about to throw up before I went and sat in front of the camera. I know it sounds strange, but, because you're an influencer, an Instagrammer, and all that stuff. You're all about being on camera. You'll rarely see a photo of me on Instagram. But I just don't like how I look on camera. And it's just me. I know that, and I'm not going to get into the depths of that. But thanks to John and Greg, it's gotten so much more fun to get on camera. And I think that's why I thought, I'm ready to do that documentary now, because they're going to show the full process of restoring one of these stereos.
Yes.
Wow. May I ask John a question?
Sure.
John, you saw the photos I sent you recently, of course, of the full rebuild restoration?
Yeah.
Because that's what, actually, when you told me about doing a podcast, a smaller podcast about Clairtone and Clairtone restorations, I think that's what edified it for me to agree to do the documentary, because I've been fascinating back and forth. But since you and Greg both expressed such enthusiasm to see the process, and I think everyone loves a good before and after story. You know what I mean? So, yeah, there will be a Clairtone documentary. I'm not sure what form it'll take, but it's coming.
Well, DC, that's great to hear. And if you need a forward or anything, happy to chip in.
You want to do that audio with your sportscaster voice?
There you go. Somebody said that. That was funny. I've never claimed to have that kind of voice, but I'm glad the microphones work well.
Yeah.
I want to ask both of you a question about a piece of MCM furniture. I know that, DC, one of your favorite pieces is the 1956 model 670 Eames Lounge, designed by Charles and Ray Eames. That's just the technical description. Most people just call it the Eames chair and ottoman.
Exactly.
I have been looking for a long time for the ES 106 lounger. You know where any of those are lurking, maybe in someone's parents' basement in Canada?
Is that the long lounge?
Yeah.
Yeah. They are hen's teeth. They are as rare as hen's teeth in the sense that quite a lot were made, but you almost never see them come up. The only place I find that they must have been popular in Chicago, or at least in Illinois, because Right Auction has had probably more of those, when I say more, maybe 3 or 4, of those come up for auction than any other auction house I can think of. But, my basement find is a Serge Louis lamp. I've never seen an Eames. I did find many Eames things in basements, but not that particular lounger, no.
Well, I will be looking for that on, is it rightauctions.com?
Yeah. Right20.com.
Right20.com. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes out. Look, I think the networking aspect and the connections that we've made through the podcast are just incredible. I was able to ID a credenza I bought that was not identified through a connection with, some of the dealers and stuff that follow the podcast and are so kind enough to comment when we post. And it turned out to be a Gerald Luss credenza, who was very, influential at the time, life building and interior design and
has a great house,
furniture design for business. Yep. Incredible house. That was actually part of the discovery, is that the knobs on my credenza are the same as the knobs in the kitchen of that house. And I was able to notice that and contact the owners of that house. And Gerald is still making clocks. I think he's 95, 96 years old. So I've talked to his wife, Susan, about speaking with him on the podcast. But, it's just an amazing community. I think, too, when it came to a name, I own Kent Coffee Perspecta pieces. I'm going to do my whole bedroom in it. I have a little drum side table. It's a bit of marble. But people just go nuts for this stuff. And that's what really made me feel as though, somebody might listen if I give it a shot and try to host a podcast.
Well, if you're getting down to the level of knobs, you're really becoming a forensic modernist.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
This should be like, modernism crime scene investigation.
I've discussed some extended episodes with a few dealers local in New Jersey. I really find it interesting when there are American-made furniture companies that you see pieces here and there, but you don't know much of the history. I think one I spoke about with a fellow dealer in New Jersey called Flux Modern is a James Phillip furniture company out of Patterson. It's like, hey, should we call some people and record it and do some investigation? Another one on our mind is, and George, maybe we can do something together, is the story of Albert Parvin and the furniture he designed for various hotels.
Oh, yeah.
As well as American of Martinsville and some of the connections that he had. And so, doing a little deep dive on some interesting topics like that is definitely in our future.
Last two questions. DC, I'm going to give you this one. Why do you think mid-century modern design continues to attract such a large number of fans?
It's not a tricky question, but it's certainly a multifaceted one. I think what's interesting about design and modern design, generally speaking, is that it's not beholden to any previous style. I mean, it wasn't like the Victorians decided to bring back Jacobean architecture, for instance, or neo-Gothic architecture as they did. You get the Deco, and even Deco pays homage to, obviously, the Nouveau, and the Nouveau paid homage to earlier design, Victorian movement. But when you get to modern, it was post-war. Everybody wanted new. They were tired of the sort of the austerity of the war years and the misery of the war years, especially in Europe, and they wanted something new, and new in every way. It didn't look like anything before. It had to be just modern for modern's sake, and that's interesting from an historic, and again, historic point of view. If you're looking at it from an educational or academic point of view, that's interesting to me anyway. But right now, you have people furnishing their homes without any thought that it would go to another generation. This is disposable furniture, by and large. I'm not going to name any big-name culprits of that style, but, for instance, if you go and buy a 60-year-old shelf, a lovely teak shelf, it's already lasted 60 years. I always tell people that it's going to last another 60 years. And it's also a nice piece. And you don't have to spend a lot of money, and perhaps you shouldn't spend a lot of money to have a nice, enduring piece of furniture. Imagine you have a shelf, again, your kids are grown, they're moving into their own home, you can give them that shelf, and it's a great piece, a family piece at that point. It's not just something you bought new or used secondhand. And that I find enduring. I think there is sort of a waning interest in instant putting furniture together, flat pack stuff. I think it's always going to be there. It's part of it's ingrained now. It's always going to be a part of the cultural landscape of furniture. But there is enough people sustaining an interest in modern design and architecture because it is, how do you say it? It's optimistic. It's
hopeful.
Interesting. It's
very hopeful.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to people about modern design and the schools of modern design, the dialogue and the exchange can get a little pedantic. And I don't want to do that when it comes to design. And when I wrote the first book, second book coming soon, when I wrote the first book, I tried to stay away from as many isms as possible because I want people to understand that this is not just something people like, collect, put in museums, look at from beyond the velvet rope. This is stuff you sit on and use and play with even. You have to love this stuff, and if you get to know it a little bit, I'm sure you will develop an appreciation for it. Now, that's sometimes naive on my part, but passion comes hand in hand with naivety.
That's a good quote. Passion comes hand in hand with naivety?
Naivety.
Naivety.
I think.
Nativity is a different thing.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But that sometimes involves
that
passion,
shelter
too.
was modernist, right?
Now, John, last question. Do you think postmodern is going to have this kind of popularity, or is that hopefully over?
That's a deep one. Look, I think more than ever, people are considering their environment, right? Where they live, what they have, what they own, how long that's going to last. DC, to your point, one thing that dawned on me really early, not necessarily in terms of the art form or design form, but, so much has been done. And I think that's kind of how I think about postmodernism. We're bound to repeat. And I personally I find my solace and enthusiasm and atmosphere and
as Jicky said on our last episode, a bit of a modernist escape in this design style that I've grown to really love, right? And so I surround myself with it. I learn and I go deep about it. I just hope if people are drawn to, more of a postmodern approach or various design styles, they go deep into it, right? And they do their best and put their effort and energy towards preserving that. That's really my kind of consistent sort of call to action,
Okay.
If you find something you love, continue to invest in it, learn about it, because there's a lot there.
The podcast is The Perspecta, and it's great. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, George.
Thank you.
So much fun.
Okay, hang on. I'm just going back to the car.
So you're in the Bed Bath & Beyond now. What did you go there for?
A mini waffle maker, of course. As one does.
And what possessed you to want mini waffles all of a sudden?
Because I am doing my keto January because of my indulgent December, and it's part of my I just like to spend money.
This is the best opening to an interview I think I've ever had. Live from Bed Bath & Beyond, it's Eden Atwood.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me just tell my girl I'll call her right back.
Okay.
Hello.
We got a great opening there of you rushing out of the Bed Bath & Beyond. It's so nice to meet you.
Likewise.
It really is.
Okay.
Okay. Jazz vocalist Eden Atwood was born in Memphis and moved at age 5 to Butte, Montana, also home to the oldest Chinese restaurant in America. Her grandfather was novelist A.B. Guthrie Jr., and her father, Hubbard Atwood, wrote Tell Me About Yourself for Nat King Cole. I Was the Last One to Know for Stan Kenton, and No One Ever Tells You for Frank Sinatra. So clearly Eden was genetically engineered for this career. She's also an actress with roles on Loving, The Commish, and The Untouchables. She's an advocate and activist for children born with differences of sex development. And she's a psychotherapist. Welcome, Eden.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. So growing up, did you get to hang out with any of the people your dad wrote for?
Oh, no. I mean, by the time I was born, he was 50 and no longer living in LA. He was in Memphis, of course, and was the vice president in charge of music at a jingle house. So his career had shifted into a musician by trade.
And did he oversee any famous jingles like You Deserve a Break Today or?
State Farm, Like a Good Neighbor. That was, I think, one of the ones that came out of the Tanner Corporation, Pepper Tanner jingles. They're very cute. I have lots of recordings of them.
Yeah, that's still around.
Yeah, I don't know that that was actually one of his. I just know that that came out of Pepper Tanner.
Now, when did you first start writing and arranging your own material?
Well, I had a really inspired first piano teacher. I started in the second grade, and she had her students writing lyrics and writing simple melodies from the very beginning as a way to teach theory and a way to teach rhythm. And it was a really brilliant approach of hers. And so that started very early.
And what was your first song? Do you remember?
I think it was something that said like floating along the silvery sea, something. I don't know. It was something like that.
Floating along the silvery sea. Yeah, okay.
Right?
Yeah. I think I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard it.
There are a couple of jazz singers and performers who went into psychotherapy. I think Helen Reddy was the one that I knew the most. Tell us.
Really?
Yeah. Helen Reddy became a psychotherapist in Australia.
I had no idea. And one of my favorite songs to sing recently is You and Me Against the World.
Oh, that's a beautiful song.
It's a wonderful tune. And she sang it beautifully.
She certainly did. And she passed away just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Quite young, actually, comparatively these days, where people live into their 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, as a psychotherapist, Eden, is there any cure for people who love modernist architecture?
I'm afraid there's not. It is purely a matter of management and maintenance.
I see. No drugs we can take, anything like that?
I'm sorry to say no. It is the daily practice of not going down the rabbit hole.
That is true. We should put that on our T-shirts. Modernism, a daily practice of not going down the rabbit hole. Well, this first song, You Leave Me Breathless, was written in 1938 by Frederick Hollander and Ralph Freed for the movie Coconut Grove. It's been covered by some unusual personalities. Ozzie Nelson, who most people don't know was a band leader before he became a TV dad on Ozzie and Harriet. Another TV dad from My Three Sons, Fred McMurray, who I didn't even know sang at all. Plus Nat King Cole, Ray Charles, Nancy Wilson, and Ella Fitzgerald. Here's Eden from her 2004 album, This Is Always, the Ballad Session.
You leave me breathless. You heavenly thing. You look so wonderful. You're like a breath of spring. You leave me speechless. I'm just like the birds. I'm filled with melody, but at a loss for words. That little grin of yours, that funny chin of yours, does so much to my heart. Oh, give your lips to me, for darling, that would be the final touch to my heart. You leave me breathless. That's all I can say. I can't say more because you take my breath away. That's all I can say. I can't say more because you take my breath away.
You know, Eden, there really is that experience of being breathless when you meet somebody you resonate with for the first time. It's like either all the oxygen in the world is in your system or it's gone, right?
I've had that experience.
Yeah, I have too. It's like where the air is electric and for some reason you're not hungry. I've always noticed that. I completely lose my appetite when that happens.
Yeah, that's a good call. I recognize that too.
Yeah. So, as a therapist, what are most people coming in for these days?
Anxiety.
Yeah?
Yeah, anxiety, panic attacks. That's a big uptick. That is part of the pandemic. People are not able to manage the things that have been difficult for them in the ways that they used to. They're much more homebound. There's cultural shifts that are happening, and people don't have access to the same kinds of things they used to have access to manage that anxiety. And maybe manage is what I'm hoping to help people do. I would say maybe what they did previously was more along the lines of distraction.
It's got to be tough for both young people and single people for whom social interaction is the day-to-day expectation.
Indeed. It's been very hard on young people. I have an 18-year-old son myself who's in his senior year of high school. He happens to go to a boarding school now for this. So they have a closed campus. But for those kids that are still in public school systems, it has been profoundly dysregulating and destabilizing that everything they thought they could expect and everything that they were used to expecting has changed so drastically.
I've read different accounts how we're going to have new kinds of mental illness coming out of this pandemic.
Well, I don't know that there's any new flavors of mental health issues, but definitely an uptick because we're having to learn how to adapt. And adaptation can be very stressful, particularly when you have historical trauma or anxiety.
Oh, sure, on top of what you're already dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any good tips for coping for us cooped up in our houses?
Yes. Here's one of my big tips that I give to everybody. If you feel that you are starting to get anxious or tight, you have to learn how to notice it when it's at a 3 so that you can use some of the hacks and tips and interventions like breathing and focusing on soft belly. If you let your belly be soft, it's very difficult to hang on to tension in other parts of your body. But if you sort of do what we all kind of used to do, which is just to ignore it and keep ourselves busy, and then occasionally you find yourself at a 6 or a 7, by the time you're at a 6 or a 7, you sort of have to just ride it out and let the cycle complete. But if you catch it at a 3, when you're trending up, you have a much better shot at managing it without having to go into a full anxiety attack.
That's good advice, because we do feel it coming on. We just ignore it or pretend it's not there.
And sometimes people don't want to bring more attention to their anxiety because they are afraid it will inflame it or make it worse. So they're used to using distraction as a way to pretend it's not there. And previously, when we've been in our busy lives, going here and there, that may have been a strategy that could work sometimes, but we don't have that same sort of access. So this is one of those places where we need to adapt.
That is great advice. Thank you. I'm trying to get my belly soft right now. I'm trying to just sort of ease into it. There we go.
Oh, soft belly is a good one. You try it. You try to tense up your shoulders when you have a soft belly. It's very challenging.
It is challenging. Duke Ellington and Paul Francis Webster wrote this next song in 1941, and Duke Ellington put it on the charts. It's been covered by Shirley Horn, Lena Horne, Tony Bennett, who just retired at age 95, Yvonne DiCarlo, who everyone remembers as Mrs. Herman Munster, past guests Jane Monheim and Stacey Kent, and some guests we'd like to get on the show, Sarah Gazarek and Tony Tennille, and even Cher. Here's Eden with I Got It Bad, and That Ain't Good.
The poets say that all who love are blind. Well, I'm in love, and I know what time it is. The good book says, go seek and ye shall find. Well, I have sought, and my, what a climb it is. My life is like the weather. It changes with the hours. When he's near, I'm fair and warmer. When he's gone, I'm cloudy with showers. In emotion, like the ocean, it's either sink or swim. When a woman loves her man like I love him. Never treats me sweet and gentle the way he should. I've got it bad, and that ain't good. My poor heart is sentimental, not made of wood. I've got it bad, and that ain't good. Now when the weekend is over and Monday rolls around, I end up like I start out, crying my poor heart out. He don't love me like I love him. Nobody could. I've got it bad, and that ain't good. Sweet and gentle the way he should. I've got it bad, and that ain't good. My poor heart is sentimental, not made of wood. I've got it bad, and that ain't good. Now folks with good intentions tell me to save my tears. I'm glad I'm mad about him. I can't live without him. Not above me. Make him love me like he should. I've got it bad, and that ain't good. Oh, I'm
Eden, is there much modernist architecture in Carbondale, Illinois?
You'll be shocked, but no. I don't believe that there is.
I was wondering if maybe some of the Chicago Oak Park influence reached out to Carbondale, and maybe there were some mid-century modern churches or something like that in town.
No. We are 3 hours north of Memphis, so there's a lot more in common with a Southern sort of attitude and style than there is with Chicago, which is 5 hours to the north.
Okay. So you're more influenced by Memphis.
I'd say so.
Now, where can people reach you and buy your music and follow along and see you perform sometime?
Well, the usual outlets, I suppose. I don't manage that really anymore. My music career is, I'm on the Shirley Horn track, which is get my kid raised and through high school, and then I get to reemerge. So I've been recently sort of reemerging, and I've done a couple of gigs in Chicago recently with my incredible friend Paul Marinaro, and you should definitely look him up. He is, what a singer. And so I've done a couple of gigs at Winters Jazz Club in Chicago, where I lived for lots and lots of years. So it's on the horizon. So I think, the usual outlets for right now. And then a quick Google search will tell you where I am.
Thanks so much for talking with me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Modernist realtor Angela Roll. Okay, Tom, let's go.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 15,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Help rogue archivist Carrie Cesarino fight seasonal affective disorder by sending her an email, or scotch, to carrie@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I will be back soon with another waiting to exhale, breathless edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.